Hi, I'm Ron Woods, Director of Player Development for the USTA. This videotape is one in a series of player development videos designed for coaches and players. As in previous tapes, certain principles of sports science are featured. We believe the sports sciences are the foundation of coaching education and development. The game of tennis is more popular worldwide than ever before, and there have been rapid changes in equipment, technology, and training methods. Let's take a look at how science can help us adjust to these changes.
The purpose of this video is to present to coaches and teaching professionals the basic fundamentals of stroke production to help develop our American players most effectively. There are basic concepts of biomechanics which are important to stroke production. We will talk about these concepts and how they apply to the various shots. Building fundamentals around biomechanics will allow players to progress more efficiently toward their potential. Over the years, great champions have hit the ball in many different ways, and with a variety of grips for each shot. We will show some of these different types of shots and talk about their advantages and disadvantages. There are some common characteristics which are important no matter what type of stroke. The video will consist of showing the biomechanics of shots which are played in the various areas of the court, including the serve, return of serve, baseline, midcourt, and net. We'll show some junior players who are part of the USTA player development along with some of the top professionals on the tour. Before each segment, Dr. Paul Rodert, the USTA Administrator of Sports Science, will comment on the concepts used in each shot. The players that we show in this video may not have perfect technique, but they generally have good biomechanics and hit the ball with consistency and power. The coaches that will be participating are Nick Saviano and Lynn Raleigh. They are the directors of coaching for both men and women, respectively. They're joined by our national coaches, Carol Watson and Rodney Harmon.
The field of biomechanics deals with the application of the laws of physics to human movement. In this videotape, we will be explaining some important biomechanical concepts and their direct application to the tennis strokes. The first of these is the kinetic link principle. This is also sometimes called the kinetic chain principle, summation of forces, or simply the linked system. Swinging the racket with efficient, synchronous movements of the legs, hips, trunk, and upper limb, the linked system results in optimal force and control. This concept is probably most easily explained in looking at the tennis serve.
The majority of force in almost every tennis stroke is generated from the ground in the form of a ground reaction force. When you serve, your feet push against the ground and the ground resists or pushes back with the same amount of force. This force then needs to be transferred to the rest of the body in the most efficient way to achieve both control and power on the shots. Knee flexion is first among the body movements in the linked system. By flexing and extending the knees, the player has created a solid ground reaction force. This will function as the foundation for the other segmental actions. The proper amount of knee flexion and extension depends on a player's strength and coordination. Hip rotation is a crucial component in a good serve. This is where linear and angular momentum are transferred from the legs to the trunk. Once force is effectively transferred to the hips and they have reached their maximum rotational velocity, the trunk is rotated. Most good servers use a significant amount of trunk rotation to generate angular velocity. The next component in the system is rotation of the arm about the shoulder. The sum of all these integrated forces then results in optimal acceleration of the racket. The proper timing of these segmental actions will result in achieving optimal force as well as control in the serve.
Serving is like pitching in baseball. Good servers keep their opponents off balance by changing speed, spin, and placement. Be aggressive with your serve and take pride holding serve during match play. Think of your serve as a secret weapon.
There are 3 key points on the serve. Take your time and have a consistent ritual before you serve. Have a clear purpose for every serve, including placement and spin. And number 3, have a consistent toss. The standard position is for the player to be facing sideways to the net before start. The front toe is positioned approximately 45 degrees to the baseline. The rear foot is positioned parallel to the baseline. Occasionally, a player will move the rear foot slightly back to create a more closed stance. As Jeff is demonstrating, one of the problems with the closed stance is that it blocks the hip rotation and therefore decreases power. Some players will begin the motion with their weight on the front foot. Some players will begin their motion with their weight beginning on the back foot. The upper body should be erect and relaxed at the beginning of the service motion. To begin the swing, both hands will generally drop together and separate at the center of the body. The racket arm drops into a pendulum motion, allowing the racket head to swing up first behind the body to about shoulder height. The toss should be high enough to allow for full extension immediately after contact. Generally, the toss should be in line with the hitting shoulder. The toss should always be out in front of the body. However, the distance forward will vary with each individual player and the type of serve. The changes in toss location must be subtle so as not to telegraph your serve to the receiver. As the forward swing takes place, the upper arm internally rotates at a high rate of speed. Power on the serve is initiated from the ground up. The knees bend slightly and then extend upward toward the hitting area. Each player has an optimal contact point to generate power and spin. Contact should be made slightly before full extension. Generally, contact will be made out in front of the body directly above the hitting shoulder. The contact point may vary depending on the individual and the choice of serve. The flat serve will be contacted at 1 o'clock. The slice serve will be contacted at 2 o'clock. The kick serve will be contacted at 12 o'clock. Players must make an effort to snap the wrist and bring the racket through impact quickly. The speed of the service motion is often described as slow to fast. Slow preparation, fast hit. The server's weight moves into the court at the finish of the serve. Either foot may contact the court first. On the second serve, the racket head velocity is often faster during the delivery. The key to hitting a good second serve is that the ball must have a great deal of spin to control its flight. The racket movement on a second serve doesn't move forward as quickly as the first serve because of the exaggerated vertical movement required for spin production.
Players now return serve more aggressively than ever before and can take control of a point on their very first stroke. Because the serve is generally hit with more force today, the necessity of proper technique on the return of serve is vital.
An understanding of Newton's laws of motion will assist us in describing how to achieve control and force in our strokes. The law of inertia states that a body will stay at rest or in motion until acted upon by an outside force.
When running for a wide shot, you will have to use muscular strength to overcome your inertia so that you're able to recover and change directions. Contracting the muscles of your legs can also help you in overcoming your resting inertia. The split step is a great example of using muscular contractions to create sufficient force against the ground to be able to move quickly in any direction. Although the split step is performed before almost every stroke during the course of a match, it may be most critical in preparation for the return of serve.
Here are 3 keys to the return of serve. Number 1, players should do a split step immediately before the opponent contacts the ball. Number 2, use a quick turn of the front shoulder while simultaneously preparing the racket for the hit. Since players have less time than with a normal ground stroke, the backswing will be small and compact. Number 3, players want to get their feet in position to step into the shot. Since this is not always possible, they should at least have their weight moving forward into the shot, and they should cut off the angle on the wide returns by moving diagonally to the ball. The full swing is used against a slower serve that requires the receiver to generate power. The block return is used against a powerful first serve to simply get the ball back in play. The chip and charge return is effective if your opponent's second serve is weak and you want to approach the net. You need a good shoulder turn, a short backswing, use a little underspin for control, and hit the ball on the move as you take the ball early.
Every body in motion has a certain mass and a certain velocity, The product of these two is known as momentum. Both linear and angular momentum are important to tennis players.
As you step into the ball, you are increasing your linear momentum. Therefore, an example of linear momentum involves transferring your weight into the shot. Once linear momentum has been transferred, angular momentum comes into play in the form of body rotation.
When I learned the game, I was taught and worked hard to perfect what were then considered classic strokes. Today, with the changes in racket technology, ground strokes have become more powerful. Some grips are different, and there is more variety of styles.
Over the past 20 years, ground strokes more than any other shot have undergone significant evolution in what is considered standard and acceptable technique. Let's take a look at some of these changes as well as other fundamentals which are essential to developing a world-class foundation. Of the four grips, Western, Semi-Western, Eastern, and Continental, the Eastern and Semi-Western grip have evolved into the most commonly used by elite players on the forehand. These grips enable the players to generate power and impart topspin while comfortably making the transition to the net. The Western grip, while used by some players, presents certain limitations: difficulty in getting underneath low balls, vulnerability on faster surfaces, difficulties in making the grip change necessary for the transition to the net. The Eastern is the most commonly used grip on the one-handed backhand drive.
The law of acceleration states that force equals mass times acceleration.
An example of this principle is that if we increase the acceleration of our racket by swinging more forcefully, we will then apply more force to the ball as well. Since the mass of the racket does not change, force becomes directly proportional to acceleration. Of course, keep in mind that there is a trade-off between force and accuracy. Both are important in executing the tennis strokes. Let's take a look at how this principle applies to the differences among the open, square, and closed stances on the forehand.
Players can hit from three stances. In the square stance, the back foot lands first and the front foot steps forward toward the net just before contact. The front foot is directly in line with the back foot. This is the classic style, which helps assure good weight transfer and keeps the body sideways to the net on contact. In the closed stance, the back foot lands first and the front foot steps across the body and beyond the point of where the back foot has landed. This stance is generally not recommended, particularly on the forehand side. The closed stance makes it virtually impossible to get adequate hip rotation on the shot. In the open stance, the back foot is the last foot to land before contact, and it is closer to the contact point than the front foot. Generally, it will either be directly to the side or slightly behind the impact point. This stance is more typical on forehands than on backhands among top players. Players with semi-Western and Western grips generally prefer this stance. One constant characteristic amongst virtually all elite players is early preparation. By the time the ball is landing on their side of the court, most of the preparation is completed. During the initial preparation stage, you can see the player step out toward the direction of the ball as he simultaneously rotates the hips and shoulders. This is called a unit turn. It prepares the player for lateral movement and initiates the racket preparation. The unit turn is used for both forehand and backhand sides. This should start the instant the player recognizes where the ball is going. As the player approaches the final stages of preparation, which is right before the racket starts accelerating forward, notice the flexion in the knees and the pronounced pull in the front shoulder. This is what I call loading up. This helps the player get maximum power on demand by using angular momentum. Loading up is used on both the forehand and backhand sides. Aside from the serve, the forehand has evolved into the most dominant shot in tennis. Some of the primary changes in the forehand over this time include open stance, the evolution of the inside-out forehand as a dominant shot, increase in power, and the ability of players to impart more topspin. There are numerous types of backswings which a player can use successfully. Each one has advantages and disadvantages. However, most elite players use some form of loop backswing on the forehand. A consistent hitting zone is one of the most important components of a successful stroke. The hitting zone is the distance of the ball from the side of the body as the racket accelerates forward. Each player has an optimal hitting zone. This zone should be just far enough away from the body so the shoulders, hips, and racket can comfortably move through the hitting area. As the racket accelerates through the hitting zone, notice the head remains still throughout the contact phase. The contact point varies depending on the player's grip and the particular shot being hit. The more the player moves toward the western grip, the farther out in front of the body the contact point should be. The follow-through should go out toward the target area. With few exceptions, the racket path will be from low to high. On forehand, some players wrap the follow-through around the neck. This is acceptable. However, it is critical that the players swing the racket head through the hitting zone and out toward the target area. The inside-out forehand has really come into prominence over the past 15 years. Here are some of the reasons for those changes. An increase in power in the game due to stronger players and racket technology that enables players to hit winners from the backcourt. An increase in slower surfaces, which cause the balls to bounce higher, and a decrease in fast court surfaces such as grass and carpet. The move towards using semi-western grips, which makes it easier for players to deal with higher bouncing balls. And players using more topspin, resulting in higher bounces. The keys to successfully executing an inside-out forehand are getting into position quickly and preparing early enough so that the player is able to hit the ball either inside out or up the line with the same preparation. When setting up for the inside-out forehand, players will backpedal into position. Players will use different types of footwork depending on the distance they have to move. However, elite players overwhelmingly use the open stance to execute this shot. This stance helps facilitate hitting the ball inside out or up the line, particularly when using the semi-western grip. Notice a turn of the front shoulder and hips. Also notice how the back leg really drives up into the shot as the racket is about to accelerate through the hitting zone. At the beginning of the preparation phase, both hands are on the racket. The shoulders are level and the back is relatively straight. The elbows are in close to the body as the upper body rotation begins, which initiates the racket preparation. This rotation assists in the storing of energy in the muscles of the back and shoulders.
The law of action and reaction states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
We mentioned the ground reaction force when we talked about the serve, whereby a player pushes against the ground and the ground resists or pushes back with an equal and opposite force. Another example of this third law of motion is the use of the opposite arm during the one-handed backhand.
As you approach the ball on the backhand stroke, plant the back foot first, then transfer the weight forward to the front foot by stepping into the shot. Notice how the front foot lands only a split second before contact. Kevin Kim has a beautiful one-handed topspin backhand. In fact, his basic style is very similar to Pete Sampras. He has what I call clean preparation. Look at his good posture and balance as he approaches the ball. His shoulders and back are relatively straight. Notice how quickly he gets into position and lines his body up for the oncoming ball. His racket is back early. Notice how the non-dominant arm moves back in the opposite direction as the racket arm accelerates forward. This helps to maintain proper balance and keeps the back shoulder from coming around too soon. This is one of the major differences between the one- and two-handed backhands. Due to the fact that players with two-handed backhands have less reach than players with one-handed backhands, it is essential that they have excellent footwork and body position to strike the ball in a consistent hitting zone. The advantage of using two hands is that it provides more strength and support. This may be particularly important on return of serve as well as balls at shoulder height and above. The two-handed backhand has some disadvantages. Players with the two-handed backhand sometimes have difficulty mastering the one-handed slice. They are also more limited in their reach than one-handed players. This makes it more difficult on very wide shots or short, low balls.
Your center of gravity is the point around which your body mass is equally distributed.
The position of your center of gravity will change as your body position changes. As your arms raise, the position of your center of gravity rises. By bending your knees, your center of gravity will lower. Keeping control of your center of gravity is important in controlling your balance. The most balanced position is with the center of gravity between your base of support or your feet. The transition game shows the importance of good balance. For example, controlling your center of gravity and balance will help in properly executing approach shots.
Transition includes serving and volleying and approach shots. In both cases, midcourt play is a very important part of today's play. When in the backcourt, players are moving their opponents around looking to set up either a winner or an approach shot opportunity on a short ball. This is an area we really emphasize when working with players. When serving and volleying, players are trying to get to the net as fast as possible while still maintaining good balance.
During midcourt play, players should have the following objectives. Each player should be able to, first, make a smooth transition between the baseline and the net. Second, recognize when there's an opportunity to attack the net. And finally, understand when to go for a winner and when to hit an approach shot.
Here are some key points to remember when hitting approach shots. Generally, the balls which are suitable to approach the net land slightly past the service line or even shorter. It is critical to attempt to make contact at the peak of the bounce or on the rise. If the ball bounces high, look to hit a winner or forcing shot. If the ball is below the level of the net, use a slice. The standard rule is to play the ball down the line so as not to give your opponent an angle on the passing shot. If the ball is wide, your best option is to go down the line and follow the shot into the net. If you have a two-handed backhand and are learning to hit a one-handed slice, turn the shoulders early. Practice sliding your non-dominant hand up to the throat of the racket. The non-dominant hand will release from the racket when you start the forward motion of your swing. This will enable you to spread your non-dominant hand in the opposite direction to help maintain balance. Continue to move your feet through the stroke. The head is still at contact and throughout the rest of the stroke.
Today, with the power game and the more forceful ground strokes, serving and volleying is more challenging. But many players are working the point well and trying to get to the net for the kill. With the tough passing shots in singles and the big returns of serve and doubles, proper technique on the volley is more important than ever.
Serve and volley is another way to make the transition from the baseline to the net. When you are serving and volleying, you are putting yourself in an aggressive or offensive position. Also, your intention is to close the point out at the net and to force your opponent into making an error. The most effective serves to allow you time to get into the net are the kick and slice serves. Following your serve, take several explosive steps toward the net before your opponent is about to strike the return. The split step occurs just when the opponent is about to make contact on the return. You will then move in an explosive diagonal direction to the volley. It enables your body to move in a continuous motion forward up to the net.
Balance is defined as the ability to maintain equilibrium of the body.
Dynamic balance is the ability to maintain proper body control while moving to a ball and during the execution of a shot. Players who are out of balance often lean too much, so that their center of gravity gets too far outside their base of support. This is particularly important during volleys and overheads, because quick reactions are required.
With more power in the game, the mechanics of the volley take on greater importance. Specifically, there are three areas that really stand out. First, early preparation. The player gets a quick turn of the upper body and immediately lines the racket head up behind the flight of the oncoming ball. Second, contact the ball in front of the body. And third, squeeze the grip just before contact to keep the wrist firm.
Unlike some other aspects of the game which have changed, the recommended grips used during the volley are still continental and eastern. Before hitting a volley, it is imperative to utilize a split step. Whenever possible, step into the volley just before contact to transfer the weight forward. On wide balls, move diagonally toward the net to intercept the ball. The shoulders and back should remain relatively straight throughout the stroke. It is critical to bend from the knees rather than the waist on low balls. On low volleys, slightly bevel the racket face for more underspin, which will facilitate more net clearance and control. On slower waist-high and shoulder volleys, take a longer backswing while keeping the racket in line with the oncoming ball. When preparing to volley, the racket head should be above the wrist with the racket face in a slightly open position. There should be a small, if any, backswing. On most volleys, the racket should remain in front of the body, even with the backswing. For both the forehand and backhand volley, the follow-through is short and compact and in the direction of the target area. On the backhand volley, the hand stays on the throat until the racket begins to move forward to make contact with the ball. The non-dominant hand moves in the opposite direction of the racket on contact, particularly on the high volleys. Contact should be made further in front and more to the side of the body versus the forehand volley. Most players with two hands on the backhand ground stroke will begin volleying with two hands on the backhand side. It is recommended that the player evolve into using a one-handed backhand volley. To help make this transition, it may be easier to start the player hitting the volley with two hands and then release the top hand to start the follow-through. The advantages of the one-handed backhand volley far outweigh the two-hander for these reasons. The player has more reach on wide and low balls. Also, there is a greater ability to impart underspin for control. On the drop volley, the stroke is basically the same, except the shot should be attempted only when in an offensive position. When preparing to hit an overhead, the first movement made should be a quick shoulder turn and a drop step to begin the body moving backwards. Though it's possible to successfully hit overheads with a full service swing, an abbreviated service action is recommended. Keep the ball in front of the body while maneuvering into position. Swing up and try to contact the ball with the racket extended comfortably up to the peak of the upwards swing action and contact the ball in front of your body. Keep the non-dominant arm up to help keep both shoulders up and level. A scissor kick could be necessary to maintain balance if you're forced to jump to reach the lob.
In this tape, you've seen how some of the biomechanical concepts have a direct application to your tennis game. We hope an understanding of these concepts will allow you to play more efficiently and effectively. Good luck with your game.